Hey, Nelson County Schools. We are so excited that you have decided to join us or watch at a later time our very first NCS series of. Sorry, I forgot to delete the live one or mute the live one. So anyways, we're very excited that you are here to watch the NCS series, very first episode of networking and connecting our schools. I have been very privileged to go throughout every one of our schools in Nelson County, and there are so many great things happening at each of our schools that I felt like they should be highlighted. And so today we are going to be talking with Jeremey Booher, which is the president. He wishes he was the president. The principal at the Nelson County Area Technology Center. And so we are going to be talking about real life application and how his teachers and some of his teachers are going to be sharing, his instructors are going to be sharing with us how they incorporate real life instruction. And then also the Marazano Note-taking Strategy. So these are tools obviously that can be implemented in your all's classrooms as well. And then at the very end of our video, I will let you know who is going to be on the next episode of the networking and connecting our schools. And so I'm going to just a couple of YouTube things. If you are watching live and you want to chat with us, you need to be signed in for one thing in order to chat. And then you also need to have your own channel created. So through Nelson County Schools, everybody has a YouTube channel. All you have to do is click on either your face if you've uploaded a picture of you or your initial. And once you click on that, it'll bring up the option of my channel. And then it's just literally you clicking a button that says create channel. So that is it. And then once you create the channel, you are then able to be identified by YouTube, and so therefore you can chat with us. If you have any questions throughout Jeremy's time that he's talking or any of the other instructors over there, then I will also be watching the live feed as well. And so we'll get those answered as soon as possible. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Booher.
All right, well, thank you, and thanks for having me. There we go. Thanks for having me today. And my teachers, I've got 3 teachers here that are going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing. The first one is Miss Mattingly. She's our health science teacher, and she's doing some good things with Marazano's note-taking strategy, so I'm going to let her explain those. And then we've got Mr. Cantrell and Mr. McClure here that are actually using real-world strategies and real-world ideas and concepts that will answer your questions for you when the students are in your classroom saying, Miss Jones, Miss Smith, why are we learning this today? So the things that you are teaching in your classrooms are the things that we're teaching over here, but obviously ours we're gearing more towards real world. So they're going to kind of teach you about the tie-in of what they're teaching and what's going on in their classroom and how that ties in directly to what you're teaching so that you can answer that $1 million question of, why are we learning this? What's the point of this? Am I ever going to use this in real life when I graduate? Who cares? So we're going to try to answer those 2 questions for you today, one about Marazano's and the second one about real world instruction. So the first teacher that I want to turn it over to is Miss Mattingly. She's going to teach you about Marazano's note-taking strategy.
Hi, I'm Amy Mattingly, and I'm the health science instructor here at Nelson County ATC. And I have to take a minute to say that I thought when I first started teaching that I thought the kids would absorb a lot, like a sponge. You know, you could pretty much talk as fast as you wanted to and say what you wanted to, and it would just absorb. But that's not true. I noticed a lot of times I got to treat them like they're an 80-year-old elderly person with dementia, and I have to give them that time to think, you know, after I call on their name. So that was something that was hard for me to do was, you know, I wanted them to answer so quickly. But I am old school. I learned, I went through high school and college using PowerPoint. And so that was kind of embedded in me. That's how I should teach. And while I was using that, I was getting pointers from Mr. Booher where he would evaluate me. And he kept talking about this man, Marazano. And, it gets to the point where I just wanted to choke Marazano. But eventually, I just started calling him a friend of, my principal has helped me learn how to use PowerPoint and note-taking for the kids in a better manner. So if I give a PowerPoint, the first thing I tell them is to don't write anything. Put your pencils down. Look at me. Listen to me. You can look at the board, but listen to me, because if you think about it, if you were old school like me, what did you learn when you were watching PowerPoint? You were learning absolutely nothing because you were too busy writing. And so you were kind of missing what your teacher or your professor was saying. And, and it wasn't until I went back 3 or 4 times reading it over and over, my notes over and over again, that I had learned it. So with this technique, you have them put their pencils down and focus on you. And because the PowerPoint is mostly for me, it keeps me on track, and not just for the kids. But so I have them put their pencils down, listen to me, and then I just mute it where the screen goes blank, and then I start asking questions about what we had just talked about on that PowerPoint screen. So they were actively listening and hopefully, letting it sink in. And then I will go back, unmute the screen and let them write what they need to write. And it's always important to, not just talk about what we talked about on the screen, but expand on that. In healthcare, critical thinking skills are so important. And these kids, they just don't understand, why isn't it A, B, C, or D, or true and false? And in real life, things aren't like that. So you have to question them a lot. You can't just stand up there and lecture. You need to say, okay, what if we had this scenario? And have them think about it and have them think outside that box. And you're doing that PowerPoint, not just, discussing that PowerPoint, but go further into it, get them, questioning them and getting them to think, like I said, outside that box, and not just everything is black or white. There's that gray that's always in the middle. And so that's healthcare is a lot of, a lot of critical thinking skills, decision making on your own. And I'm trying to hopefully start instilling that in them now, because I wish somebody had started that earlier on me. It would have made my nursing career a lot easier than trying to pick that up in nursing school and then getting the bulk of it once you get out on your own. So I use a lot of scenarios and questions to try to broaden their thinking. And then we just go back to the PowerPoint, which, like I said, keeps me on point. We start all over, and we'll go to the next slide. I tell them to put their pencils down, and then we discuss it. I will black it out, and then we'll talk about it. We'll do questions, scenarios, and then I'll turn it back on so they can write what they need to write down.
That is fabulous. I love the fact that you are giving them time to process. And I love that because they do need that time to process and that think time. So many times we start just firing questions at them and don't give them the time, like, to internalize what we were actually talking about. Or so there is a power to think time. And that is definitely what that strategy does help in that aspect. So thanks for sharing.
Well, thanks for having me. And next we have Mr. Cantrell. So I'm going to turn it over to him.
Sounds perfect.
Is this thing on? So I'm actually not Mr. Cantrell. I don't teach IT, but I'm here anyway. I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night, so we should be good. No, just kidding. She's looking like, wow, what a nerd. Hey, you know what? I'm not the nerd. We talked about this before. Yeah. No, seriously. Amy talked about great stuff. Amy was actually one of my intern teachers, and she's just amazing. I would say that she's surpassed me in a lot of ways. She's amazing. Yeah, you're amazing. Okay, go away. Probably if I was to mention something I'm doing different than what she is, and that would be blog posts every day. It's hard for me to do, to keep up with, to grade, to create, but we all do bell ringers, and bell ringers are oftentimes tedious and, you know, kind of repetitive, and you got to keep track of all the paperwork and stuff. Well, I'm not a paper person. So the first thing I knew, if I wanted to do a bell ringer every day, I had to put it electronic. And so every day we do a bell ringer in the form of a blog post online. And so you could do it with Google if you wanted to. You could do it electronically and the kids submit it, you know, however you choose to do it. Sometimes it's, you know, upon the method could be easy to keep up, could be hard to keep up with. But bottom line is what we do is we actually have the students comment on other students' posts as well. And so it kind of creates a learning environment. And creates that kind of community support blog where they all kind of learn from one another. Some of the kids are always reluctant to want to post, but that's not altogether a bad thing, because when, you know, another kid who is very willing to post, they'll go ahead and post something, and others will kind of follow their lead and learn from what they wrote as well. So that would be the first kind of maybe different educational thing that I'm doing, just doing it all electronically. Probably the second thing that I always reinforce to students is the metric system. I was kind of reminded recently, I went to Louisville and we're going around the Gene Snyder Freeway. I was interested to see that they actually have kilometers listed first and miles second on the signs. Like, okay, you know, I-64 is 4 kilometers away. And I was like, oh, wow, they actually got kilometers listed first. And so what we do here is I try to reinforce to the kids, not just, you know, in the sense of metric system used on our highways and our serial boxes and things. Obviously, we have to teach a metric system with IT, because when we talk about values of resistors, you know, we're talking about the metric system, electronic components. When we talk about bandwidth, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the metric system. When we talk about storage with a computer, we're talking about the metric system. And so it's always a good repeat thing for the students to get that. Okay, I get that. That's why we need to know the metric system, because it's really part of our daily lives. And, you know, it's always good not only for us to review with them, and it's always good to see those kids that have it down pat. And then we kind of do a little bit of remediation for the kids that don't have that. The other thing that we do that kind of is an gen ed type thing is the electricity. We just finished a module last week with my PC repair kids, and that was testing computer power supplies and testing electricity that goes inside the computer. And so one of the things I always cover with them is a little bit of electron theory. And it's like, wow, we're incorporating science into a computer class. Well, we need to, in order for the kids to understand this idea of amperage and resistance and voltage. You know, what is voltage? What's the difference between AC and DC voltage? Why is this important to the computers? You know, how does this drive how we're going to build our gaming machine, right? The fact that we have to pick out the wattage, and what is this about amperage and, you know, a voltage that actually gives us our power, and what is the formula to do that? What is the mathematical formula? And I always tell them it's easy as pi, P equal I times E. And then we cover a little bit of Ohm's law. You know, they have to learn this relationship about resistance and voltage and current. Yeah, resistance, voltage, and current equal I times R. Anyway, so it's kind of the gamut of things. Just trying to reinforce some of that gen ed stuff, but they need to know that stuff for the computer stuff as well. And sometimes I had one of my junior students yesterday who, you know, one of the upper end students. He's like, "Are we finished with the electricity stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, we are." And he said, "Thank goodness." He said, "Because man, that stuff is hard." Well, you know, I think in this modern day society, we need to know this core stuff as well. Even to work on the computers is important to know. So, and that sums it up. And we're going to turn it over to Doug McGlure, and he's a carpentry teacher, and he's got some good stuff to talk about that they're doing down there in that lab. Thanks.
Mr. Cantrell, real quick.
Okay. Yep.
Can I just make a couple comments if you don't
Totally.
mind? So there were a couple things that you commented on that you all are doing at the ATC and especially in your class. First of all, blogging.
Mhm.
And with that, have you had to teach digital citizenship of what's okay to respond to, you know what I'm saying? Like, how have you incorporated digital citizenship into that? Because I know a lot of teachers are reluctant, is the best way to put it, to have other kids comment on other kids' responses, or having an open field of responses, period.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's actually one of the first lessons that we do early on in the year. You could almost argue that's one of my weed out lessons. You know, if the kids got to be responsible to be in the course, and we'll have like the second or third day, we'll have an ethics discussion, and I'll ask the kids, you know, how many of you know what ethics is, and how many of you understand about copyright and plagiarism, and you know what's legal and what's not, and rationales as far as downloading music and copying pictures off the internet, and we'll cover fair use. And yeah, absolutely very important that the kids know this stuff, and very important that it's reinforced to them, because this is, you know, as we all know as educators, that this idea of plagiarism has become an increasing problem, even for the K through 12 and also at the post-secondary level. And they need to be aware of that it's really not hard for us at all to check for it. And, you know, the implications for us is maybe a slap on the wrist or, you know, corrective behavior, but in college they're going to be ejected, you know, which is not good.
Right. And then there was one more thing that I love that you said, and it was that so many times we get goggles on that with blinders when we teach just one subject area, but to incorporate other subject areas within that one subject area that our main focus is on is very eye-opening for the kids. So like you were talking about how you all brought science into the IT world, which it's very, I mean, they're like BFFs or best friends forever, you know? I mean, they really are. So I really thank you for putting all the work that you do into that class and giving those kids those experiences. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, no problem. That's what we're here for. So, you know, I figure if nothing else, I need to earn my pay anyway, you know, pull my weight. So I appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely.
I will turn you over to Doug McGlory.
All right. Sounds good.
Hi, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Like you said, I am Doug McClure. I am the carpentry instructor here at Nelson County ATC. And I think I have the best job in the world because we get to build cool things. But this time of year is always exciting for me because the students are getting ready. We have the Skills USA Carpentry Club here. And part of that competition, you know, they get to build really neat things at regional competition. But part of that is what's interesting for me is that I get to reinforce some of the mathematical principles that are taught across the parking lot here. And one of the cool things is I think I see on their faces this aha moment, you know, because I know when I was in school, I always asked, you know, why do I need to know algebra? You know, that's pretty much the obvious thing, you know. And so when I I teach it, but I also, this time of year, like I said, for competition purposes, I have to go back over it again and sort of reinforce it. But though the algebra, you know, going back to, I guess the one thing that I can come up with right off the top of my head is Pythagorean's theorem. And we use that a lot in class and in competition to figure roof pitch and how to figure a roof rafter. And, you know, a lot of the times I'm sure that maybe some of the teachers across the parking lot struggle to sort of make a real world application when it comes to Pythagorean's theorem and don't understand it, or letting the students understand why they need to know that. And in my class, I mean, my students, they have to know that. And, you know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And, you know, that's what I said. I really enjoy this time of year because then you get to see that aha moment. That's why we need to know that, Mr. McClure, you know, and it's a lot of fun, you know. But because I've had a conversation with one of the other math teachers at the high school, and we had the same conversation. It was talking about, how did I teach slope, if you will, or how to figure a roof pitch. And I said, well, there's actually, in my world, there's 3 different ways that I teach it. The first one, and probably the lengthiest, is Pythagorean's theorem. And the second, and a little less complicated, is using a framing square. And then finally, we got a little cheat sheet book. And so I put all 3 of them on the board at the same time, and I let the students, kind of see why we do the things we do, and how that correlates to what the teachers are teaching across the parking lot. So, like I said, the kids get that aha moment. So now, I didn't get that when I was in high school myself. Of course, I didn't get it until I started working in the field, and then I was like, oh, I remember that. But I think that's probably the most fundamental things that I teach to my students that has real world application towards what they're being taught across the parking lot as far as mathematics. Because, that's one of the first things that I teach the kids, is reading a tape measure. I mean, it's something as simple as reading a tape measure. And I said, what is it? And everybody says, it's a tape measure, Mr. McClure. And I was like, well, yes, but it's more than that. I said, all it is a bunch of fractions. It's all it is. It's just a bunch of fractions. And you've learned about fractions. And actually, it's a little more simple because now it's not dealing with mixed numbers and all this craziness. It's just, standard fractions. And so, but yeah, I really enjoy the carpentry, teaching carpentry here and giving those students, the opportunity to have that aha moment about, what I'm learning in the high school math classes, and can actually use it here in my class and give them a real world application. So I hope that helps. At least I know with one of the teachers that I spoke to, he really liked the fact that I taught the 3 different methods to figuring roof pitch or slope. And yeah, I hope that helps. So.
So that's awesome. First of all, thank you for sharing. So there were 2 things that I just kind of wanted to highlight. Making connections between one building and another. What you're learning over here, because you said the Pythagorean theorem, the a squared plus b squared plus or equals c squared, and like, I just wanted to twitch because I never knew why I learned that. Like, what in the world did I learn that for? And so, but it is that those connections is how kids retain information. That is exactly what happens. And and then the second thing that you discussed that I just kind of want to highlight as well, that could be useful to any school, is allowing students to have choice on how they want to solve things in math. And I mean, people complain all the time about Common Core and how it gives them 5 different ways to solve a multiplication problem and 5 different ways to solve a division problem. But you know what? Some kids like to have that choice. Some just want to know the one and stick with the one, and that's fine too.
Absolutely.
But giving them choice of choosing, I think that is really, really important. And that's something that could be used throughout our county. So thank you so much for sharing.
No, going back to what you just reiterated with the choices, and the reason I teach the choices is because, in the real world, using Pythagorean's theorem, or, it gives you, and I show the students, I can get a more accurate calculation of what that roof rafter is. However, in the real world, that's why I have to show them the other 2 ways, is because there's a thing called time, and time is money. And they need to understand that by using Pythagorean's theorem, that it's going to take them longer, and their boss might get a little upset if they're taking too long to figure this roof rafter when they could go and use a framing square and get it done in half the time, you see. So I have to show them the 3 different ways because they need to know where it's coming from. So sorry, I didn't keep going with that.
No, you're fine. Courtney's joining us, and she said that it would be great to see our math teachers collaborate with folks like Doug. Our kids wonder about algebra too. So, I mean, so opening up those connections. And then she also said we are going to begin to see more interdisciplinary approaches to teaching in the future of education, which is really exciting. So I think that what you guys doing over there is just tremendous.
Well, thank you. I mean, I enjoy it. I really do. So
yeah, absolutely. No worries. Thanks for being brave.
No, that's all right. I'll let Jeremy talk. So
okay, sounds good.
All right, so hopefully everybody learned a couple tips, strategies, techniques. You know, those are just three of our teachers that are over here at the ATC that are utilizing some various different things between Marazano's and between, you know, real life applications. So just so I practice what I preach. Actually, before I get to that, I do want to add on to the Marazano's thing. I think the biggest thing is with the Marazano's, I use that as mine in my instruction when I was in the classroom as well, and it took my classroom to the next level. One thing that she probably didn't expand upon a lot of is once you're talking, and you don't have to use a PowerPoint, it could just be daily discussion, you know, put those, emphasize the students putting the pencils down and have that discussion, because that discussion leads to the higher order thinking questions. And then it allows that classroom to, you know, really grow and grow in depth. And then once you get to there, you know, every single lesson that I started, it was start with your learning objectives, your learning targets, teach the lesson, and then at the end of the class, you're going to have the bounce off questioning. Same thing with, you know, just that normal instruction. You know, she talked about putting the PowerPoint up, having them drop their pencils, and once they finish the discussion, picking up the pencils, covering the PowerPoint, and then having them take the notes and elaborate on the discussion. But, you know, whether you're just switching to the next slide, as she talked about, or you're recapping a class, I think the biggest thing that helped with that is really using that bounce off questioning. So what I'd always do was I'd pick on my students. If my learning objectives for the day were be able to tell me the three factors that apply in pricing, which are supply, demand, and then, you know, well, that was, if I'd say name two of the three, supply and demand. Anyways, if we're talking about those terms and I had a student, I called on a random student and they couldn't give me that, then I would go over to Johnny and say, Johnny, what were two? And they'd say supply and demand. So then I'd come back to the first student I called on and I'd say, what are the two factors that determine price? And they'd say supply and demand. So I'd come to that. And that, like I said, that on top of what she said with Marazano's made our class grow. So in practicing what I preach, because I don't ever try not to do a faculty meeting without practicing what I preach, we are going to use a little bit of Marazano strategy. And I want you to give us three things, three tools that our teachers shared today that you could implement and utilize in your classroom. And since you're the only one that I can see, I would randomly call on somebody, but Ms. Chenault, you're the only one I see, so I'm going to call on you and pick on you.
That's fabulous. Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like I'm back in like high school again. Sweating bullets. Definitely, I love the whole idea of having classroom discussion. That's something that I utilized in my classroom where I had student-led discussions, and we called them the kitchen table discussions, just because at a kitchen table, you don't sit there and raise your hand to wait for your turn. You know, so they had to learn, there was, you know, some boundaries and so forth. But that was one thing that you just shared that I really liked. And then also the blogging that Mr. Cantrell talked about, that is definitely something that could be utilized across the board, even in elementary schools. You know, it can look in different, it doesn't have to be digital, but how nice would it be to expose the kids to replying to someone in a constructive way? Because so many times, and I've seen it in my own classroom, but I still see it. It's like their comments are like, "Good job, nice," you know. And where do they get those things from? In my views, they're getting them from the teachers. You know, that how do we reply to them? How do we respond to them? What type of feedback are we giving to them, or how do we comment to them? So that was the second one. And then the third one that I really liked was the fact that the PowerPoint or the Google Slides directing instruction. the use of that, because those are living and they can be changed at any point. However, if you print them off and it's a table on your desk, it's a table on your desk. It's like a chart on your desk. Then it just sits there and it's stagnant to me. And so I really like the fact that she was using PowerPoint or Google Slides, whichever one, for her lessons.
Good deal. And last, those are three very big things. And the last thing that we're here for is we want to begin, just like you had a comment, of collaborating more with all of the schools. So one thing that I just wanted to emphasize and showcase that's going on real well, Foster Heights got a hold of us back in December, and we collaborated with one of the grade levels there. I believe in February, they're going to get up with us. They are actually doing a lesson. It's kind of a mini geography lesson about they wanted their students to build a bridge. You probably have seen the little bridge kits. So they're going to teach the components of the math section, and then they're actually going to collaborate with our CAD department here. They're going to come up here and have the pressure test used up here. They're going to use some of because we already have a lot of those kits where we do that in drafting. They're going to be able to use our tools to be able to cut it, model it, and then they're actually going to do a PBL based off that and have our students come in and talk about all the different things that go into drawing and designing and actually using a blueprint. And then what we're actually going to do is our students are going to collaborate with the Foster Heights students and get groups. The students at Foster Heights are actually going to design the bridges. We're going to put them in an actual blueprint. Once we test them, and whichever group decides, or the teachers that decides the best blueprint, is the best, most structural one, our students are actually going to put that on our 3D printer, and we're actually going to print a actual 3D model of that bridge that was the winning one. So, it's ways like that we can collaborate here with the homeschools. And that's one way that's coming up in February that we're going to begin. But, I invite any of the educators that are out there watching this, any of the administrators, if you have any ideas or any suggestions, any PBLs, we've already collaborated. Like I said, we're collaborating in February with Foster Heights. We've already collaborated on a PBL with Cox's Creek. We would love to be able to do more PBLs with you all. And you can use our students if you want real life people. You can use our students to pitch the idea if they're going to be the people that are they can run the business, quote unquote, and they can pitch the idea, and then you could use our students as the experts in that field to really emphasize what lesson, what unit that you're going through. And those are some good ways that have happened. So I think that's the last thing I want to leave you with. Just think about ways that you could utilize us to collaborate, because it's not a one-way street. Even though the projects are going to be based on Foster Heights on this project, the students are getting the learning, but our students are getting that leadership. They're getting that leadership to be able to go in front of a class, pitch an idea, be able to collaborate with others and say, hey, these are the standards, these are the specifications that have to be done on a bridge to be able to put a blueprint to paper. And then, once you go into that 3D modeling, this is how it's going to have to be, so it gives them communication, collaboration, and also that leadership skill. So I invite anybody that wants to collaborate with any of our teachers, any of our programs, to call me, email us, email the teacher. We're open to anything. So
that's so awesome. That is definitely awesome. So thank you so much for being on our first episode of Networking and Connecting Schools, because that is what we need to be doing more of in Nelson County, because there's great things going on in Nelson County, but we're all facing forward. And so we're going to spread our wings a little bit. So thank you so much again, Jeremy. I will go ahead and tell you that our next episode is going to be with Dana Cole and some of her wonderful educators out there at Boston. And her focus is going to be on culture. And so I really look forward to talking to them about ways that they build culture. If you want to get a preview of what that is going to be about, let me show you how to get access to that. That is going to be on February 6th, which is our next our next series episode for this. So this is, if you've not visited our new technology website, this is our new technology website. If you go under programs, you'll see networking and connecting. So go ahead and click networking and connecting and you'll see our blog. And once again, this will feature, and this one's called Laying the Foundation. So you'll just click Laying the Foundation. And right here, you can read a little bit about it. It also has the time on it. And then if you are interested in watching this video back, or you want to show someone some of the ideas that you have seen, the live video, as soon as it's uploaded, will be right here with Mr. Booher and his wonderful staff at the ATC. So I just want to thank you guys once again for watching and being a part of this. And until next time, we'll see you later.